You're listening to Protecting What Matters, a podcast by the Ohio Department of Commerce. Commerce is Ohio's chief regulator, and we play a vital role in keeping you safe by protecting your property, your money, and some of the products you use every day. This podcast is designed to bring awareness to important issues and help educate consumers and businesses. Join us as we chat with trusted industry experts focused on providing you with the tools you need to help you protect what matters most in your life.
They're counting on it. 11.5 million people are counting on the fire service in Ohio to be there. And when 70% of those folks volunteer their time for nothing to serve the public, we've got to help them in any way that we can.
This is Protecting What Matters, a podcast by the Ohio Department of Commerce. I'm Andy Ellinger, the Public Information Officer for the State Fire Marshal. The State Fire Marshal consists of 8 bureaus whose mission is to safeguard the public, its property, and the environment from fire and related risks through education, regulation, investigation, and enforcement. Earlier in the year, Governor Mike DeWine assembled the Ohio Task Force on Volunteer Fire Service to study and make recommendations to improve volunteer service in Ohio. That's what we're talking about today with State Fire Marshal Kevin Reardon and Ohio Fire Academy Superintendent Jack Smith. How are you guys today?
Very good. How are you, Andy?
Good.
I'm doing great. Why is this task force on volunteer fire service so important?
There are so many answers to that. I'm going to try to touch on every single one of them. Let's start with our population. We have roughly 11.5 million people in Ohio. We have 1,180 fire departments in Ohio. And among that 1,180 are full-time career paid departments. We have a combination department that might be part paid, part volunteer. But we know the largest sector of that 1,180 fire departments is the true volunteer fire department. So these are people that are not career paid firefighters. They are community members that serve their community by being a member of the volunteer fire department. So to be a volunteer in Ohio, it's actually difficult. We don't make it easy to be a volunteer in Ohio, but they have to have training and be certified as a volunteer firefighter. Many of these people have to buy their own protective gear, which can cost upwards of several $1,000s. And they have to be able to leave their families to take an emergency response somewhere in their community. So they're leaving their families in the middle of a dinner, in the middle of a family event, a holiday, whatever. But these volunteers serve their communities for nothing, and they do it to help their communities and help save lives. So given the fact that out of that 1,180 fire departments, about 70% are volunteer, we can see already there's a lot of stresses within that sector for a lot of obvious reasons. They're in rural communities. You can drive no more than 5 minutes away from any of the large urban areas in Ohio. The Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Akron, Middletown, Lima, 5 minutes away from any of those size cities. And you probably are going to be served by a volunteer fire department if you need emergency help. So it's very critical right now that we try to help that sector of public safety find ways to survive, because they are struggling. There are some volunteer fire departments in Ohio that are doing very well. They have strong community support, and part of that community support is financial support. There are other departments, the volunteer sector in Ohio, that are not doing well. And so much to the point that there are many volunteer fire departments in Ohio I don't think will be around in 5 years. And that's a problem.
It's a crisis.
It is. And when you have a citizenry that depends on picking up the phone and calling 911, to not have them show up is going to create a problem for those communities. And beyond that, it's going to create a problem for all of the other fire departments around that one department that decides they can't exist anymore, because that spreads the stress and that leads to longer response times. And here again, response times in the volunteer sector are nothing like what you have in an urban area with their career paid department. Most of the fire departments that are career paid in the larger cities in Ohio, you might have a 6-minute or less response time. But in an emergency, every second feels like an hour. But in the rural area and you call for a volunteer fire department, you need to keep in mind that if it's during the daytime, many of these volunteers have jobs. So they have to leave their job, go to the firehouse, get their equipment, and then respond. That takes time just to do that, and then to get wherever they need to go. And we have some parts of Ohio where traveling, Southeast Ohio is a great example. There's not many straight roads in Southeast Ohio. So that's a factor too for any kind of an emergency response. So there's a lot of things we need to look at with the volunteer community, but the biggest thing is we have to help them find ways to survive into the future.
Now, you and Jack are part of this task force of 25 members appointed from around the state. Tell me a little bit about who is involved in this and who stepped up to serve on this committee.
So on the volunteer fire department side, the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association has 3 representatives on the committee that come from a volunteer background. And then the Ohio State Firefighters Association, which is the larger organization in Ohio that represents all of the volunteer firefighters, they have 4 representatives on the committee. And then we have some other folks appointed by the governor from the County Commissioners Association, the Township Trustees Association, and some other organizations like that, because we need their insight and their input from where they sit into how we can help make this a better situation long term.
The goal is to get the governor a report by next June.
It is.
So the clock is ticking, and we're looking at 4 focus areas that this task force is looking at. And Jack, you're chairing one of those focus areas. Why don't you go over just what you guys will be looking at in the coming months?
Sure. So I'm chairing the subcommittee on training issues and looking at how we can streamline both the initial certification training as well as continuing education requirements. As the Marshal said, you can imagine somebody who works a 40-hour-a-week full-time job somewhere, and then in the evenings and weekends taking away from their families to make runs at the firehouse as well as do that continuing education. How can we make that more user-friendly and improve access to that? The other subcommittees are focusing on funding and taxation and organizational structure as one group, and then the other group is recruitment and retention. And that's a problem nationwide as in the fire service as a whole, both career paid and volunteer. We are far enough past that post 9/11 wave of recruitment and interest. And Ohio has been losing, on average, 2 to 3% of its volunteer firefighters every year since then. So, we've lost 20, 25% of our volunteer firefighters over this past decade or so. When you couple that with data points like a recent study out of Stanford University that prior to this most recent spike in inflation, the average family income allotted for inflation is the same as it was back in the 1960s. However, now it takes 2 income earners to earn that same income. So if both mom and dad are working, who's able to stay home with the kids when there's a parent free to do that? So that, along with the fact that a lot of the Rust Belt jobs, the industrial manufacturing jobs throughout the Rust Belt have gone away. A lot of these folks are commuting a distance, an hour or better, out of their community to find work. So they're not even in town to be able to make an emergency call if that's the case. Right.
Yeah.
So we're not limiting your fact finding to just the work of the task force. You're also planning a listening tour around the state in 6 different areas to cover the entire state. These listening tour stops will be open to all volunteer firefighters and open to the public as well. So tell me a little bit about these roundtables that you're holding.
The listening tour is very important because you will have the members of the volunteer task force, either in person or on the Teams platform, available to take comments from volunteers, volunteer organizations in the fire service, and anybody else. We may have some citizen comments in there, but we need to listen to them. We think we know where there are issues. We think we know what most of the issues are, But we need to verify that what we think we know, we really do know. And we also need to make sure that there's something we're not overlooking. We're only going to get that by going out into the field, into where these departments are located, and talking to them. I'm looking forward to the tours because it's an opportunity for us to have that sharing experience of, we're going to sit back, we're going to listen, you know, we're going to take notes. We are not going to do much of the talking at all. The task force is going to be listening. And that's the biggest benefit we have with this, is getting more input from the people that are actually the volunteers, the volunteer chiefs, the people served by volunteers. That's what we want. We need to hear from them directly. We've heard and know about a lot of the issues because we get out and we talk to individual departments. We talk to individual fire chiefs. We interact with them through our daily routine in the fire marshal's office. But we need to make sure that we're hitting, you know, a wider range of the volunteer community that doesn't communicate with us very often, doesn't call us very often, don't have many issues. They're just in survival mode. Those are the folks we really need to hear from. And the public is important in this also because access to emergency services is so easy now. You can pick up your cell phone, or if you still have a landline, you pick it up and you can dial 911 and somebody's going to show up to help you. That's a pretty easy thing to do. But what the general public needs to understand is what has to happen behind the scenes to get a fire department to your house or to your wrecked car or wherever you're having a problem. There's a lot of things that have to happen to make that happen. Some of it is funding. A lot of it is funding. If a community has high expectations of what their volunteer fire department can deliver, they need to support that financially because the fire department doesn't make money on its own. In communities that are doing well, that's what we see. We see a community that has supported fire levies. They've supported increased fire levies to add personnel, to buy new equipment. But we also see the other end of it, where a volunteer fire department is typically and classically in survival mode. They're living from levee to levee, and they can't get ahead because the community there's a disconnect between the community expectations and what the fire department can deliver. So the citizenry is a big part of this as well. They should ask questions, and I encourage everybody to visit their local fire department, meet with their fire chief, meet with a local volunteer firefighter, and talk to them. And learn what is possible with what is available.
So in addition to the roundtables, you're also developing a survey for the volunteer fire service so that all their voices can be heard throughout the state if they couldn't make the roundtables and attend those meetings. Tell us a little bit about the survey that you're developing.
Well, we're going to have two different types of surveys. We're going to have one survey that's aimed for chief level officers. We want to know from them how big their department is. Are they all volunteer, or are they part paid, or are they one of those combination departments I talked about earlier? We want to know that. We want to know their budget information if they'll share it with us. We want to know about their population, how many runs they take a year, how large their response area is. Those are the types of things we're going to have on that survey. On the other survey for the average volunteer, we want to know what made them decide to become a volunteer. If they're no longer a volunteer, why did you leave the volunteer service? We want to know some things about training. You know, give us your views about training as a volunteer. Those types of questions, we want to talk to them because we need to learn from them what's making them stay and what's making them leave. The average age of the volunteer firefighter in Ohio right now is around 55 years old. That's something that is startling. It's startling. Firefighting is not a spectator sport. It is an active beating up of your body kind of experience. It's hard work. You can get hurt doing this job, whether you're a volunteer or a career firefighter. The risks are the same. We need to find out from those people why they're leaving, because if we can figure that out, we can maybe come up with some fixes to take care of that. But one of the largest problems we have is recruitment and retention. In recruitment, we're not getting young people at the community level to volunteer. We are just not. And I know Chief Smith can talk a little bit more about that, because that's one of the things that they're looking at.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have seen as far as an approach for recruitment that seems to garner a lot of success, both across Ohio as well as across the nation, are volunteer fire departments that have active explorer posts or cadet programs. One option is to run that through the Boy Scouts. They have an explorer program. They also have standalone programs that they just sponsor within their own department. But those departments that have those type of explorer programs and are actively involved in the high schools and the junior high in their local communities, recruiting at that level, getting kids involved at the fire station. Obviously, they're not taking emergency calls, but being around the firehouse, washing the trucks, understanding what the job is a little bit about, and from an explorer standpoint, really garners their interest. And there's about 20, 22 high school-based firefighter training programs across the state in various career tech schools. And even in those programs, the students that perform the best academically, stay engaged, or the highest motivated, are the ones that are part of an Explorer program at their local volunteer fire department. So the volunteer fire service is not the only one seeing results from that. Private industry has been doing that for a while, doing a career day type of thing and getting people involved and interested at the junior high level. And that's where they're capturing, getting a pipeline for employees, as they come out of high school. So it's got a lot of success, behind it.
A startling stat I saw was Ohio has 1,180 fire departments. Of those, 70% are staffed by volunteers, and those fire departments receive nearly 1.4 million calls a year. That's an amazing number.
It is. When you take away the large cities and the large number of runs they have, well, what's left is still a rather large number out of 1.4 million. And those runs are being taken by departments that are volunteer. So once again, these are people that serve their community to serve their community. We have some volunteers that get involved with the volunteer fire service as a way to get experience and then go on to a full-time career paid position at some point. And we'll always have those people. But what we're really missing right now is just the average citizen at the community level that wants to serve their community. They don't want to be a full-time firefighter anywhere else. They just want to serve their community. And being a volunteer firefighter is a great way to do it. If you like to help people, and if you really want to give something back to your community that they need, there's really nothing better than the volunteer fire service. There's excitement there. There's a variety there. You're helping your neighbors. I mean, that is the spirit of one of the things this country was founded on. And that's also a proud part of the volunteer fire service history in Ohio. I was recently at the Pomeroy Fire Department down in Southeast Ohio to help them celebrate their 175th anniversary. And they are still a volunteer fire department in Pomeroy, Ohio. And that's a proud legacy. And the volunteer firefighters, those that stay with it and get involved with it, they are just as qualified as many full-time professional career firefighters I've ever worked with, and just as dedicated. It's just they don't get paid for it. That's not their job. They do it to help their community. And it takes a special person to want to accept that and to follow through and really deliver with it, because those folks are walking the walk. They're really doing it.
This task force is doing some exciting things. You have a report due to the governor by June of next year with a statewide listening tour, survey, and extensive task force and subcommittee work between now and then, with the goal of improving the future sustainability of volunteer fire departments in Ohio. Do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
We are excited. We're excited to be doing this. The fire service has known about these issues for a long time. And when I say everybody in the fire service, the career paid departments, the volunteer departments, we've been aware of all these issues for a long time in the fire service. But we're just at a point now where we can't bury our heads and not do anything about it. We have to take some action. And we need to try to help this valuable service remain that way for Ohioans because they're counting on it. 11.5 million people are counting on the fire service in Ohio to be there. And when 70% of those folks volunteer their time for nothing to serve the public, we've got to help them in any way that we can.
Chief Smith, Marshal Reardon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
To learn more about the task force on volunteer fire service, check out our website at com.ohio.gov/fire.